Hi, Toby. How's it going? It's Dee and Kate here from Sick and Wrong.
Hi.
Hey,
Hi, how are you
yeah,
guys?
good. Thanks
Good.
for being on the show today. Um, so just to start off, when you read about Vicky White, what was your
hmm
initial reaction?
When I first heard about the escape, it just made me sick to my stomach because it took me right back to that moment that I was in her very same shoes. And it's not a path I want to relive at all. So it just, I just couldn't, I just was watching all the time, wondering. And then they found their first getaway vehicle in Tennessee, and that's where we went.
Oh,
And
wow.
there were just so many similarities and so many things, and it just was really an emotional roller coaster for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, we're going to get to the
hmm
specifics of your case in a second, but
hmm
the Vicky White situation seems a lot more similar to your case than Joyce Mitchell in
Yes,
2015.
yes, I agree with that. It is so similar. There's so many things. I was just writing a blog post about how many similarities there are.
Because
It's uncanny.
Joyce Mitchell never actually there was no police chase. She never ran from the cops.
Right,
Yeah, she just
right.
never showed up. Whereas Vicky
She just
White,
didn't show up. Right.
yeah, and Vicky White perished. So the reason I'm asking is because you were in a similar situation in
hmm
2004 at the Lansing Correctional,
2006.
2006, 2006.
Yeah.
So
hmm
you were romantically involved with an inmate named John Menard, and you helped him.
Maynard. Uh-huh.
Maynard, is it
I
Maynard?
John
said
Okay,
Maynard.
Maynard.
I was wondering
Yeah.
how you said that. John Maynard, and you helped him
Yeah.
escape from prison. So at the
Yes.
time, I read that you were working at the prison as a dog trainer.
I was. I was a volunteer. I started a prison dog program there, and I took dogs I rescued from animal shelters and took them into the prison, and the inmates trained them. And then I took them out for adoptions.
Oh, okay. So the inmates were training the dogs, just
Yes,
regular, teaching
just to be
them
pets.
obedience. Okay, wow, interesting. So they weren't like canines. You weren't training the canine units here.
No, no, I
No.
wasn't training the dogs for any kind of specific tasks. I was just training them to be good pets for
Oh,
Yeah,
families.
it's like part of the rehab of prison for the
Yes,
prisoners.
yes.
Yeah.
That's
so
exactly right. And at the same time, I was rehabilitating dogs to make them available to live in society. And it was also, having a tremendous impact on the inmates who were training them. Because if you can imagine, human beings, we're such social creatures. And lots of these men had been locked up for 10 years or more. So you can imagine going 10 years without ever being able to hug someone or confide in someone. And that just is such a yearning that, has to be satisfied. And when I brought those dogs in the prison, all of a sudden there was something they could hug and love and talk to. And it just changed the atmosphere of the whole prison.
it's like
Yeah.
emotional therapy even for
Yes, it
the
is.
inmates. Yeah. So was
Yeah.
this the first time you'd ever worked at a prison or volunteered at a prison?
Yes, first time I'd ever been in a prison was the day I took the dogs in. Yeah.
So were you nervous that you could be
I never
attacked
I
or
never
injured?
was nervous. And looking back, it seems kind of silly that I wasn't nervous, but I just took in my dogs and worked with the dog handlers and just I never really looked at them and thought of them as uh criminals. I just saw
Yeah.
them as men who had a talent for bringing out the best in a dog.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, and I imagine, when you were working there, you would strike up like friendships with the inmates because they're kind of
Yes.
like
Mhm.
coworkers. So was John Maynard one of the volunteers
Yes,
or
he was one
workers?
of the dog handlers.
And so, how did you make a connection with him? Like, how did this happen? Was there like a meet cute moment?
Well, my dad was diagnosed with cancer and stage four
I'm sorry to
cancer,
hear
and we
that.
had to go to emergency surgery one night. And when I came into the prison the next day, John just asked me, "What's going on, Toby? You look like you're struggling with something." And it was the first person who had acknowledged really that I was struggling with something. And it just seemed like such a connection that he would even notice. And then things just kind of developed from there.
So it was emotional first.
Yes,
Yes.
it was. Mm-hmm.
Were were you single at the time?
No, I was married. I'd been married for 28 years.
Oh my
Oh
goodness.
wow.
And we'd kind of reached the point in our marriage where, we were coming up on, our kids had left home. They were both college students. And my husband and I really had grown so far apart during our marriage, and it was disguised by all the activities we did with our sons. But once they were gone from home, it was just evident that I was sitting in the living room with someone who felt like a total stranger. I mean,
Just
there
no
was
more
no
connection.
connection between us. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see. And so, and here you are, vulnerable. You meet this, this person you work with, and there's the connection, filling the emotional void.
yes,
I can
yes.
see that. So, was he single at the time as well? Like, did
Yes,
he
he
have any?
was.
Okay. And so, what was he? What was he incarcerated for?
Yeah.
He was in prison for felony murder.
Oh,
And so
wow.
felony murder is a charge where if someone is killed during a crime that's being committed that is a felony crime, then anyone associated with that crime can be convicted of felony murder. So he was serving life in prison for felony murder, although he didn't have a gun and he didn't shoot the person that was killed.
Was it like
But
during a
he's-
robbery
What?
type thing? Was it like during a robbery? Somebody died. while he
Yes, it was a
robbing?
carjacking. Uh-huh.
Yes.
Oh, it
Yeah.
was a carjacking, and the victim happened to die. And so was he?
Yes.
So he was probably with another person, and he wasn't
Yes,
on
he
his
was.
own at this. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so he was in for felony carjacking. So knowing this, and knowing he's in prison for life on a murder charge, how did you think this relationship was going to work out? I mean, did you think about the future of this relationship?
Well, at first I didn't think it was going to work out. I didn't think it was going to be a relationship. It was just someone I really enjoyed talking to, and he was really intelligent. So he had a lot of ideas about how, things I could do in the dog program or different ways to train dogs. And sometimes we got into pretty good debates about different ways to do things. And he was sure his way was better, and I was sure my way was better. And I had to, convince him of the benefits of my idea. And it was kind of invigorating, to have an in-depth discussion with someone about something that I cared about.
Well, it must have been exciting too after like a 20-year,
Yes, it
20-plus year
was.
marriage.
It was really exciting. Yeah.
So, were you physically involved? Were you physically involved with him at the prison?
It grew to that point, although it's really difficult. So, those instances were rare because there's just no privacy and
There's no
people are watching.
opportunity.
But there were, a couple instances where we could steal a kiss but mostly it was like, when I was walking a dog and I was checking a dog that had a medical issue, then his hand would brush my hand as we were looking at the dog and things like that, which were just like electrifying, even more so because of the fact that you couldn't really hold hands, so
Yeah, it's forbidden.
it was
isn't
such
it?
an artificial
Yes.
environment that
Yeah.
everything just sizzled at such a high degree.
It's like a secret intimacy that you were sharing.
Yes, it was.
So, how secret was it? I mean, did you tell anybody about this relationship?
I didn't tell anybody. And as far as I knew, no one at the prison knew either. I think that after the escape, some of the dog handlers were like, oh yeah, there was that time, and they had been spending a lot of time walking around together. They started putting two and two together, but up until the escape, no one had any idea.
And if if the management of the prison found out, would you have been fired?
Well, I was a volunteer.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
but
so-
I would have been, not allowed to come back in the
allowed to
prison.
come back.
And John Manard would have probably been moved to another facility.
Right.
So tell me, how did the escape come up? So you're involved with him for like how many months before the escape?
Just a couple of months, really, just a couple of
okay.
months. But,
But
one
very
day he said to
intense.
me, if I weren't in prison, would you be with me? And I said, I might, perhaps. And that was all he needed to hear. And then he just took off and was figuring out, how was he going to get out of prison so we could be together. And I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that for several weeks. And then he, came up and said, I'm going to get out of here. Will you go with me? And I said, I can't do that, and then he said, yeah, I think you could. And, and then eventually I was like, yeah, I think I will go with you. I think I want to run away from what I have here. So
you thought
then he
about
started sharing with me different ideas about, I'll just put myself in a box and ship myself out. And I was like, that's a stupid idea because of this, or this, and then he'd come up with another idea and I'd say, well, that's even dumber than the first idea. And then one day he came to me and said, I could hide in your dog van when you pick dogs up for an adoption. And I said, oh, now that one probably would work. And so then, we were off trying to figure out all the logistics of when we were going to try and all that kind of stuff.
So how did it all go down? Like, did you hide him? Did he wear a different outfit? Did you hide him in a crate or something and slip him in the back of the dogs?
So here's what happened. Once we had decided that we were going to attempt this and we had picked it, we knew we were getting close to picking a date. And one of the unit team officers came to me and said, you have this huge wire dog crate in here that you used for that pregnant dog with her puppies. And now they're all adopted. And I don't want a wire dog crate in here because it's a security risk. The inmates could cut up the metal and use it for shanks. And he said, I need you to get this crate out of here. And John was standing right there and he said, that crate is really big. It's like 3 feet by 4 feet. And it's hard for Toby to carry. So how about if when she does a dog adoption, I bring it down to the gate and I just load it in the van when she's picking up dogs. And the unit team said, that'd be a good idea. I'll give them a note at the guard shack to let them know that to expect a large crate, on this particular adoption day. Well, then John put a cardboard box inside the crate and fit himself into that cardboard box. And then I had a farm wagon inside the prison that I moved 50-pound sacks of dog food around on. So he put the crate on the farm wagon and then got inside the box, inside the crate. And he'd asked his roommate and a couple other cellmates. He told them that he'd gotten called into work that day and I was expecting this dog crate. So could they just bring the crate down and load it into the van for me? And they said, sure.
So they had to pick him up and then put him in the van.
How it happened. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like he gets a lot of leeway for being a murderer. I mean, he's in there for a murder conviction. Was he being watched? I mean, it sounds like he had a bit more freedom than
he wasn't being watched any more so than any of the other inmates it was a medium custody prison at the time where he was. And, there's all kinds of safeguards and those apply to all the inmates. And so he wasn't treated any differently than any of the rest.
So when you were working on, planning out this escape and executing the escape, in the back of your mind, were you having doubts? Were you saying I'm doing something, that is, I'm breaking the law here? I'm like, did you question it?
The whole time I felt like it was a game, like this fantasy game and we're going to do this. Oh yeah. And we'll do this and this will work and that'll work. And I honestly never thought it was going to work. But at the same time, I never thought it would fail either. So it was just this weird kind of fantasy mind game. And then all of a sudden he was really in the van and I was really driving out and we had done it. And I was shocked. I was just shocked that it all came together and it worked.
Yeah, I could imagine when the realization sets in as you're driving down the highway, like, wow, we just escaped from a prison.
Yeah.
So what was your plan while you were on the run? Were you like, we're going to go to Mexico, we're going to go to Canada, or were you just kind of flying by the seat of your pants?
We had prepaid for a month at a cabin in the mountains in Tennessee where we thought we could hide. There weren't many people around. And we didn't know where we were going to go after that. And John had mentioned Mexico, but I knew from watching TV that the Mexican prisons were terrible. And I said, I'm not going to Mexico because if we get caught, I don't want to have to go to jail there. And we hadn't really figured out where we were going to go when our time was up in Tennessee, but we were discussing that. And we had we had thought maybe what we should do is go into a big city, because I think it's easier to get lost in a big city than it is in a rural area.
That's true.
But we hadn't figured out where yet.
So how long were you on the run for?
12 days.
12 days. And I guess in that 12 days, what was your relationship with John like outside of the prison?
You know, we had built this relationship between the two of us kind of in this artificial environment of inside the prison, where stuff is so stilted and so limited and you're just not free to really be yourself. So there were it was kind of interesting, because now here you are in this relationship with this person that you really don't know all the ins and outs of their personality, and I learned that John had a really quick temper. And he'd get mad about something, but just as quickly his temper would be gone. And I was surprised, at his temper. And I think he was probably surprised at how naive I was about some things. So we were trying to get to know each other at the same time. We were crazy in love with each other. And it is just such a weird situation.
Was your family and friends in the press? Like, were your sons and your husband in the press saying this is
that
madness.
You're missing.
This is crazy. Where
my
is she?
parents did a press conference or press release or whatever outside their house, begging me to come home, but I never saw it. We didn't turn on the TV or anything and didn't listen to the radio. So I never knew what was going on while I was gone. And now that, I'm back and I had a chance to talk to my family afterwards, and I've seen what Vicky White's mother's gone through. It's just horrible to think that I put my family through that and I didn't even think about how it would affect them. Honestly, at the time I left, I truly believed that nobody would even notice I was gone, that I felt that invisible.
Yeah.
So that was a sad way to feel.
So how did you get caught after these 12 days?
Well, it's so silly, because I bought a truck and I knew we had to license the truck. So I had him send the title to the cabin we were staying at so we could license the truck. Although I used a false name, but they figured out it was me. And so that brought him to Tennessee. And so they were looking for us in Tennessee. And we had gone out and we were walking through the parking lot at a mall. And it was late at night. I mean, like 9 o'clock. The mall was still open. And we walked right in front of the truck where the 2 U.S. Marshals in charge of the fugitive team looking for me were sitting and thinking about what were they going to do tomorrow to try to find us. And we walked right in front of them and didn't know it. And we got in our truck and we headed down the interstate to go back towards the cabin. And about an hour down the interstate, they had set up this trap and they had closed the entrance ramp so no traffic could get on the interstate. And there was 50 or 60 police vehicles on the interstate to trap us. And they had a helicopter with a spotlight and it was quite dramatic. And John decided he was going to run and he floored it. And we had this high-speed car chase at 100 miles an hour. And then we hit a tree head on.
Oh, so were you injured?
No, I had the wind knocked out of me. I think I had a concussion probably, but no stitches, no broken bones.
That's amazing.
We were lucky, unbelievably lucky.
Well, yeah, I watched the police chase video on your website.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. It is. Yeah, it's hard to imagine, hard to fathom a 100-mile-per-hour police chase when they're right behind you like that, and you see the impact into the tree.
Yes.
So in contrast to Vicky White, it sounded like Casey White was of the mentality, I'm going to go out guns blazing. I'm going to go out murder, death by cop. So were you concerned that John might have that same sentiment? Like he might want to do this?
No, I wasn't. And in fact, I don't think he had that thought at all. And we did have guns with us, but we never brought them with us in a car. They just stayed in the cabin. And we never even took them out of their case. So I don't think that was John's intent.
Oh, okay.
So, when you were captured then, and you were finally separated from each other, what was the fallout from this? Like, I imagine your sons must have been like, this is the craziest thing Mum has ever done. Like, what's going on?
Well, actually, my sons never had. My youngest son died of cancer a year after I got out
I'm
of
sorry
prison,
to hear that.
and my oldest son still does not have a relationship with me. So,
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
That's unfortunate. What
yeah.
what happened? What about your? So I'm assuming you divorced your husband at the time.
Yes, yes.
While in prison.
Yeah, he filed for an emergency divorce, and we got divorced the day before I went to prison.
Okay, so even before. How long did you serve time for?
27 months.
Okay, so a couple years. So after you got out, did you ever speak to John Maynard again?
Yes, actually, I did. So after I got out of prison, I intended to just, stay single. I wasn't interested in a relationship, but I did meet someone, and we ended up getting married. And we've been married for, gosh, I don't know, 14 or 15 years now. And my husband's name is Chris. And so Chris knew my whole story. And one day a reporter called me. This was about 2 or 3 years after we're married. A reporter called me and said he'd been talking to John Manard. And John asked him if he would give me my phone number. And he said, I wanted to call you and get your permission to give him your phone number, because I'm not just going to give it to him. And Chris was there, and I had the reporter on speakerphone, and Chris said, Toby, I think you should talk to him. I think you guys need some closure. I think it would be good for you to talk to him. So I told him to go ahead and give him my phone number. And he actually called me, and he talked to my husband too. So he talked to both of us.
Wow.
And a few years after we started talking by phone, my husband's from Maine, and John had been transferred to a New Hampshire prison. And I mentioned to John that we were driving to Maine to see where Chris grew up. And he said, well, New Hampshire's right next to Maine. You should come visit.
Wow,
I said, they're not going to let me visit you. So he said, fill out the paperwork. You never know. So Chris and I both filled out visitor forms, and they both got approved. So we stopped in New Hampshire and visited John for 2 hours on our way to Maine.
How many years after, I guess, 2006 was this? Like when?
It was about, I'd say 7 years, maybe 7 or 8 years later.
So
I think it was in 2014.
Was it awkward to see him again?
It was not awkward. It was not awkward at all. And it was really good because, we could kind of finally fill in the blanks and see what happened to him and what happened to me, because we really were just, ripped apart and never able to talk or see each other. So for quite a while. So there were just a lot of unanswered questions, and John really liked Chris, and Chris really liked John. And I still email John. We don't talk on the phone anymore, but I do get emails from him, maybe once a week, maybe 2 or 3 times a month. We exchange emails. So,
wow.
That's nice.
So after you were released from prison, you served time, about 27 months. Was it difficult to rebuild your life afterwards?
It was so hard. It was so difficult. Well, first of all, I could never get a job because I was a felon. And even the few places that hired felons wouldn't hire me because my crime was too high profile of a crime. And they thought the media would come and interrupt their business and want to interview me. So I never did really. I took a job in Boston when I got out of prison, and I had that job for 5 months, and that's where I met Chris. But I came back to Kansas City, and that's the only job I had after I got out of prison. So I started designing websites and doing some marketing and on my own, just to support myself.
Well, I see that you wrote a memoir about this experience.
Yes.
Living with Conviction.
It's called Living with Conviction. It'll be released June 15th, and I'm so excited. The memoir is all about the rebuilding of my life. So that's the story in the memoir.
Oh, it's interesting. It'd be nice if, Vicky White should probably read something like this, or Joyce Mitchell. I think it probably definitely gain from
That's why I wrote it, because I want my story to be an inspiration of hope to other women who are facing really negative situations because of decisions they made, or life choices, or their circumstances, so that they know that they can move past them and rebuild their life into something even better. So that's the message behind my book.
Do you regret what transpired with you and John, or do you feel like it was a building experience for yourself?
Yeah, it's like a self-discovery thing.
Right. That's a really interesting question. So I'm going to answer it. There's two parts to the question. First of all, everybody wants to know if I have regrets. And my feeling is that regrets are just a waste of time because you cannot change the past. So rather than looking back at the past and thinking, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, I wish I'd done this different, it doesn't matter what I think now because I can't change what I did. So I'd rather focus on how can I move forward and make something good come of this. And the second part of the answer is the woman I am today would never even consider doing what I did. But I wasn't the woman I am today back then.
Yeah.
And this whole journey, this decision, this time through prison, this total tearing down of my whole life and having to rebuild it from scratch is what made me who I am today. And for the first time in my life, I can say I love the woman I am today and I wouldn't trade her for all the world. So I can't wish it out of my life, those experiences, no matter how difficult they were. I can't wish them away.
Well, I think it's great. I mean, you gain from this experience. So
it's a happy ending.
Absolutely. I have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I see that you're a public speaker as well. I saw that you had a program and a workshop called Escape from Prison.
It's called, my message to women is to escape their prisons. And I mean their emotional prisons. Because I think we all have emotional prisons. And that's what gets us into the situations that aren't the best situations for us. And so my program is about helping women find out who they are, build on their strengths, and become the woman that they were meant to be.
Oh, that's great. That's
I
great.
love it.
Yeah. So Toby, thanks for being on the show. And people, June 15th, get a copy of Toby's book on Amazon.
That's right. And my website's tobydorr.com, and that's TOBYDORR.com. And there's links on there to buy the book. There's links for the workbooks. I have 3 workbooks finished now and 3 more on the way. But the ebook is available for pre-order on Amazon right now. And the audiobook, the hardback book, and the paperback book will all be available between now and June 15th for pre-order. And I'm actually recording the audiobook this week and next week, and I'm reading it myself, and it'll be available June 15th as well.
Oh, great. I'll definitely have to check it out. Toby, you're an inspiration.
Yeah. You are.
Yeah,
okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being on the show.
You.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye. Thanks.